they don't know what to do. They keep hoping against hope that we can hold on to the system we have for a longer period of time. And they're a little bit like this cartoon from the early 1940s that appeared in the New Yorker. And if you can't see it very well, you see these overdressed, stuffy parents standing in front of Alfred, who's in this enormous wingback chair in this opulently furnished living room. And the father is speaking and says, "Alfred, your mother and I think it would be a good idea for you to knock about on your own for a while, but only on the estate, of course." And that's kind of the way most people are inside the school industry. We're all for innovation. We like to go to conferences and talk about our ability to and our interest in change. But we really don't want to get off the estate. And the message here is this is going to change. The kids are already learning everything that they regard as relevant on this technology platform. That is where they live and breathe. And we can either deny it and resist it, or we can embrace the innovation. And the reason why this matters, I go back to where I started. No nation, no culture, no part of the world anymore can really afford to lose half the kids in the system. And the only way we're not going to lose them is to embrace this innovation. Thank you very much.
Interesante, verdaderamente interesante su propuesta, esa innovación disruptiva. Le vamos a robar 5 minutos más o 10 minutos más para atender algunas de las preguntas que estamos recibiendo, son muchas, a través de SMS, de los asistentes y a través de quienes nos siguen a través de Internet y de las redes sociales. ¿De acuerdo? Estoy pensando quizá en sentarnos aquí en esta ocasión. Me da miedo la F, pero lo haré yo. Si hay algún problema, lo asumo. Vamos allá. Vamos allá. Me dicen que le hable en inglés, porque hay algún problema. ¿No recibe usted la traducción simultánea? You prefer in English. I've got to improve my English. My English is awful, so that's a handicap for me. But I'm going to try to do it, right? Well...
You could try your English and I try my Spanish and people would go to lunch a lot.
Spanglish. We are going to speak in Spanglish. Right. Well, the first question in Spanish... We can use it anyway. I'll try to do it in English anyway. We've received a lot of questions related to the concept of personalization and related to the disrupting innovation. And many people ask about what does the talent mean in this, in this case, in the disrupting innovation. Does it mean to extract the talent from everyone, all the pupils?
I think
I've got to improve my English, as
yes.
you can.
No, in essence, I'm really saying the same thing here that Mark said. It's not working. Do it like that? Okay. I'm saying something very similar to what Mark Prinsky said, and that is that if you ask the students what they are interested in, you will get a surprising diversity of responses. In the about 6 or 7 years ago, the MacArthur Foundation, based in Chicago, Illinois, undertook a study of digital learning in which they talk about it in terms of how many kids they found if you would allow them to organize their learning and take a higher share of responsibility for it themselves and use the technology platform in ways they are already familiar with, you found that most of them went through a period of just kind of hanging out, and we all recognize this, you know, just surfing the web, checking things out, and that most of them then would go pretty fast from hanging out to messing around. And messing around is sort of defined as, well, let's try something. I'll see if I can make my own video, or let's see if I can mix this with that and do something that's creative with it and send it to somebody else. And then, in the process of doing that, they discovered a surprising percentage of young people discovered something they were intensely interested in. They discovered what Mark called a passion. And what happens when they discovered a passion? They did a deep dive. They had a sudden surge of interest that made them want to become a real expert in that area. And isn't that exactly what we want them to do? It is them accepting a greater responsibility for the learning. It does change the role of the teacher to be the guide, the planner, the facilitator, the coach, the encourager. But the main thing is that it allows the kind of differentiation that today the system just suffocates. I mean, we have made, in our effort to set standards and to get young people to meet standards, we have slid down the slippery slope towards standardization and treating everybody the same and expecting the same kind of performance and outcomes from everybody, when the real world out there is in variety, it's in differentiation, it's in that wide universe of things that kids want to pursue.
Okay, we are going to continue with our Spanglish. I'd like to ask as well how to mix the concept of personalization with the nowadays social networks and the concept of sharing. I mean, translating into Spanish, ¿cómo se conjuga la personalización con el concepto actual de la red social, de compartir y de aprender compartiendo?
Well, I think you're talking about is there a role for what we think of as the social network and the social communication that young people practice in the learning objectives that we have for them? I think even the examples that Mark gave about the wide variety of uses that video games present is an awfully good example of that. I know many people, older people, confess their nervousness about whether it's useful to have all of these forms of social communication and whether the downside is greater than the upside, but that is the real world in which these young people live, and there are all kinds of learning opportunities that are embedded in that.
Voy a formular una pregunta, los traductores hablan mejor inglés que yo. En una innovación disruptiva, es una de las preguntas que hemos recibido a través de SMS, en una innovación disruptiva, ¿cómo contemplamos los problemas de aprendizaje? ¿Podemos entender que son niños a los que no conseguimos motivar, que son niños que tienen otras motivaciones en el proceso de aprendizaje?
Yeah, again, Mark touched on this greatly, so I try not to repeat what he said, but my colleague Clay Christensen likes to say, we can segment markets not by how old people are, or whether they live in the middle of cities or out in suburbs, or whether they drive pickup trucks or drive sedans. The right way to segment any market, including the school market, is by what job does somebody want done? So if I go buy a particular computer or I go buy a particular kind of camera, I'm trying to get a job done, and I think that tool is going to help me get that job done, okay? So ask yourself the question, what would any self-respecting 14-year-old hire school to do? Mark had a list of 10 things. You could rely on a composite of a lot of other research and just say most teenagers hire school to facilitate their social connections and to find a way to feel like a success in the world. So then you begin to ask yourself about grading on the curve, where we systematically and predictably label a whole bunch of them as failures consistently.